Hello, everyone. Tonight we're going to step into the heart of an ancient desert, a land of shimmering heat waves, parched earth, and skies so clear they seem like glass stretched over a furnace. Imagine yourself standing there, your sandals sinking slightly into the sand, feeling the merciless sun pressing against your skin like an angry hand. You glance around, and there's nothing but dunes and jagged mountains in the distance. It's the kind of heat that makes even your shadow look exhausted. And yet, you might be surprised to hear this story, because in this blistering, bone-dry landscape, thousands of years ago, someone figured out how to keep things cold. Not just cool, but icy. The Persians, those brilliant minds of the ancient world, invented something that sounds like a fairy tale. The world's first refrigerators, massive, alien-looking structures called yakchals that could make and store ice in the middle of a desert. So before you get cozy and drift off to sleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to support us. Now, turn off the lights, close your eyes, relax your body, focus on the story, and enjoy the ride tonight. You're there now, eyes half shut against the glare, the sun burning in the sky like molten bronze. Every breath feels like sipping air from an oven. The horizon ripples as if the earth is melting. You tilt your head, expecting nothing but more sand and maybe a wandering camel, when suddenly you spot it. A strange shape looms ahead, rising from the golden flatness like a mirage made solid. At first, it looks like some weird, giant beehive dropped in the middle of nowhere. Smooth curves of sun-baked clay shimmer under the heat. The structure seems to breathe with the desert itself, its enormous dome glowing pale under the punishing light. And here's the twist. This thing, this quiet lump of mud and ingenuity, holds the power to tame the desert's wrath. It's a refrigerator, without a single wire or plug. The year? About 500 BCE. The place? Persia. And you, yes, you, are about to learn the secret they never taught in school. Let's set the scene deeper. You shuffle closer. The dome towers above you, maybe 10 meters high, like a sleeping monster. Its walls, thick, ridiculously thick, made of clay mixed with ash and lime, baked to perfection under this very sun. The whole thing hums with silence, the kind of hush that feels almost holy. You put your hand on its curved skin. It's warm, yes, but beneath that surface, buried under layers and layers, is the cold. The kind of cold that whispers of winter nights and frozen rivers. A cruel joke in this wasteland. How did they do it? That's the question swirling in your head as the wind licks sand against your ankles. How did they make ice in a land where even your thoughts feel like they're sweating? Well, here's the magic. Actually, no. Scratch that. It's not magic. It's engineering. Pure, glorious, nerd-level engineering that makes you want to high-five a 2,500-year-old Persian architect. They took the harshest environment imaginable and said, "Cool story, son, but we're going to chill, literally." Now, before we go into the mind-bending details, picture this. A Persian evening. The sky burns orange as the sun sinks and the desert exhales its heat. At night, the temperature plummets. Yes, that's the desert's dirty little secret. It goes from roasting your eyeballs to bring a blanket in a heartbeat. The Persians, clever as foxes, noticed this. They realized that water left in shallow pools overnight could freeze under the open sky, even out here. That little quirk, that was their first cheat code. They harvested ice like farmers harvest wheat. And then they needed a place to store it. That's where this dome comes in. Inside that yakchal, it's dark, damp, and surprisingly chilly. The thick clay walls don't just sit there looking pretty. They work like a fortress against heat. They trap cool air and banish warmth, like an elite nightclub bouncer turning away sweaty tourists. And if you think that's clever, wait till you hear about the tunnels. Subterranean passageways snaking beneath your feet. Channels that whisper secrets of airflow and condensation. Built with such precision, it makes your modern fridge look like an amateur. You lean closer to the dome's shadow, and the desert wind sighs across your ears. Somewhere, a camel grunts, probably jealous it doesn't have a personal fridge. And you laugh softly because, come on, this is hilarious. Ancient Persians out here, literally inventing the concept of refrigeration, while you still can't figure out how to keep your ice cream from melting on a road trip. Makes you feel humbled, right? But hold that thought, because this is only the beginning. What you see now is just the skin of the beast. We're going to peel back the layers, step by step. You'll walk inside this clay giant. You'll trace the tunnels, taste the cool air on your tongue. You'll learn why donkey hair ended up in construction. Yes, really. And why these things weren't just refrigerators. They were cultural icons, economic engines, even symbols of divine favor. So, take a slow breath. Let the hot desert fade around you, and the thought of cold, delicious stillness seep into your mind. Because from this point forward, you're not just hearing history, you're feeling it, like the chill creeping up your spine when you step from blazing noon into a shadowy room. Ready? Good. Let's slip inside the world's first fridge and see what secrets it's been hiding for 25 centuries. You step closer, the air buzzing faintly in your ears. The dome stands like an obedient giant, waiting to share its secret. It's called a yakchal, literally ice pit in Persian, and the name alone feels like a cool sigh on your overheated mind. But don't let that simple name fool you. This thing, it's the ancient equivalent of a tech marvel, a Tesla of the desert world, minus the self-driving bugs and app updates. The yakchal wasn't small. No. These structures were massive, rising as tall as a 5-story building, their thick walls curving up like the back of some ancient sleeping whale. Most of them stretched over 10 to 15 meters high, their bases sunk deep into the earth. And beneath that dome, a cavern carved into the ground, wide, hollow, like the inside of an earthen cathedral. You stare into the opening, and for a moment, it feels like standing at the edge of a secret that's been hiding under the sands for millennia. Imagine this. The outer shell was made of sarouj, a special blend of clay, sand, egg whites, yes, the same stuff in your omelets, lime, and even goat hair. Why goat hair? Apparently, it added tensile strength, like ancient rebar, only fluffier. That mix, when set under the Persian sun, became nearly waterproof. It sealed the yakchal like a clay vault, keeping heat out and moisture in, because if you're going to store ice in a desert, every drop matters. The walls could be up to 2 meters thick, acting as an armor of silence against the relentless sun. You take a step inside. The desert hum fades. The light dims. The coolness hugs you like a cautious friend. You breathe in the smell of earth, baked and rebaked by centuries of summers, mixed with something faintly metallic, like a forgotten tool chest. Your fingers graze the wall, rough, gritty, cold in spots. This place isn't empty, though. It holds whispers. Whispers of engineers and laborers who molded these walls with bare hands and sweat that dripped like rain on the sarouge mix. Can you hear it? The faint echo of a hammer? The grunt of someone hauling bricks? These giants weren't built overnight. They were crafted by visionaries who understood the desert better than we understand our air conditioners. Now, here's where it gets deliciously weird. The Persians didn't just store ice here. They made it. Yes, in the desert, at night. Picture this. Vast, shallow pools dug near these yakhchals. At sunset, workers would pour water into the pools, and as darkness draped the desert, the temperature plunged. You might think, hold on, freezing water in the desert? Really? Yes, really. Thanks to the dry air and clear skies, heat escaped quickly, and the water skimmed over with ice by dawn. People woke up and, bam, instant ancient freezer section. Ice was then chopped, hauled, and stored inside the dome, layered with straw to slow melting. It sounds like a workout, doesn't it? Forget CrossFit. Try lifting blocks of ice under a Persian moon. This wasn't just a cool trick, pun intended. It was survival science. Ice meant preserved food, grapes, pomegranates, even delicate herbs. It meant chilled drinks during brutal summers. And here's the kicker. These structures kept ice solid through months of 45 degrees, 113 degrees heat. Let that sink in, and your modern fridge panics during a power outage. But this dome, it shrugged off the desert like, is that all you've got? Historians are still debating whether the Persians truly grasped the physics behind all this, or if it was a happy accident of trial and error. Did they understand evaporative cooling and thermodynamics before thermodynamics was a thing? Or were they just ridiculously observant desert dwellers with a knack for hacking nature? Either way, you have to admit, they nailed it. I mean, if you've ever complained about your Wi-Fi dropping during a Netflix binge, remember this. Someone 2,500 years ago was engineering natural refrigeration using dirt and donkey hair. Humbling, isn't it? And speaking of donkey hair, oh yes, let's talk about the strange ingredients. Sarouge wasn't your average mud. It was like the secret sauce of ancient construction. The recipe often included donkey hair, ash, even egg whites. Why egg whites? Because apparently someone decided, hey, let's make this wall so solid even time can't mess with it. And it worked. Many yakhchals still stand today. Their domes stubborn against centuries of wind, sandstorms, and the occasional camel selfie. You pause inside the shadowy chamber, feeling the hush of 1,000 summers. The temperature difference hits you. Outside, the air sizzles. In here, it's like stepping into a gentle winter. And you wonder, what would it have felt like for a Persian merchant stepping inside after a long caravan journey? Imagine trudging for weeks under a ruthless sun, your lips cracked, your skin gritty, and then cool air curling around your ankles like a whispered promise. That first sip of chilled water probably tasted better than any latte you've ever had. Just saying. And because you're already picturing it, here's a fun fact. Some yakchals were public utilities. Villagers could store food there, almost like ancient community fridges. But others? Exclusive, reserved for royalty, nobles, and those who could afford the icy luxury. Ice was currency, status, and bragging rights rolled into one. Forget designer handbags. Show up to a party with chilled wine in 500 BCE Persia, and you were basically the Beyoncé of the desert. So here you are, standing in a mud dome that rewrote the rules of survival. Above you, a shaft of sunlight filters through a tiny vent, dust motes swirling like lazy dancers. You can almost hear the desert outside raging in silence. But in here, the air is calm, almost smug, like it knows the secret of winning against the sun. And this is just the start. Because, believe me, the Persians didn't stop at giant clay refrigerators. Oh no, they built an entire system. Air tunnels, wind catchers, secret channels that made these domes chillier than your ex's heart. And yes, we're going there next. You step out from the shadow of the dome for a moment, blinking at the brilliance of the Persian sun, only to realize, oh, it's not getting cooler anytime soon. The desert stretches endlessly, shimmering like a sheet of molten glass. And yet, the Persians had already cracked the ultimate desert life hack. Not only could they keep ice in a pit, but they also made ice, right here, where the sun behaves like a bully and laughs at your sunscreen. Picture this scene. It's nightfall. The sky over Persia is a black velvet cloth studded with stars so sharp they look like they could cut you. The wind picks up, brushing sand into lazy spirals. During the day, the desert roasted like a clay oven. But now the temperature drops fast, like a moody teenager slamming their bedroom door. The Persians, clever observers that they were, noticed this dramatic dip. They thought, what if we use this cosmic quirk to make something extraordinary? And that's how the ice harvesting ritual began. You wander into a shallow field. The ground looks flat, but really, it's a grid of low-walled pools, each barely a few inches deep. Workers move silently in the moonlight, pouring water into these ponds as the chill of the night creeps in. The stars glint like icy promises overhead, and the desert air feels lighter, almost brittle. You crouch and touch the edge of a pool, cool, already hinting at what's coming. By dawn, the surface will crust over with thin ice, fragile as spun glass. And just like that, the Persians created winter in the middle of summer. Boom! Ancient desert magic. Except it wasn't magic. It was science. Primitive but brilliant. Those pools were positioned in the shadow of walls, built to block the faintest warmth of sunrise. The heat escaped upward, radiating into the vast emptiness of the night sky. With humidity so low, it might as well be negative. Water released its heat freely, freezing even when the air temperature hovered just above zero. Think about that. They turned the sky into a refrigerator. Modern physicists call this radiative cooling, but the Persians called it Tuesday. When morning rolled around, villagers and workers would break the ice, lifting sheets of frozen water with bare hands and packing them like treasure. And here's the fun part. They didn't just dump it in a pile. Oh no. They layered it. Ice, then straw, then more ice. Like a dessert nobody wants to eat, but everyone depends on. packed tight, insulated by straw and the massive clay walls of the Yakchal. That ice would survive for months, even through the vicious Persian summer. Now imagine this: a caravan returning from India, dusty and tired, bringing back spices and silk. The merchants step into a Persian town, expecting the usual warm water and wilted dates, only to be handed a goblet of chilled pomegranate juice. They probably drop their turbans in shock. A drink cold enough to make your teeth chatter? Out here, this wasn't just refreshment, this was a flex. Ice meant status, wealth, and, let's be honest, the ability to throw the best summer party in 500 BCE. But it wasn't all practicality. Oh no. The Persians turned this into an art form. They made desserts that would make your modern gelato look basic. Frozen rosewater, honey, crushed fruit. They basically invented the prototype of ice cream before anyone in Europe even thought about freezing milk. Next time you enjoy a scoop of pistachio gelato, whisper a thank you to some nameless Persian engineer who thought, yeah, let's put snow in our food. And here's something even stranger. The ice harvest wasn't just an economic activity. It became almost ritualistic. Historians describe workers moving in silence, as if the night demanded reverence. Priests would sometimes bless the pools, muttering prayers to keep the frost thick and the demons of heat away. Was that practical? Probably not. But when you're gambling on thin ice in the middle of a desert, a little divine backup doesn't hurt. Oh, and speaking of historians, they're still bickering over one question. Did the Persians actually invent the systematic use of radiative cooling, or did they stumble upon it by accident? Some scholars claim they fully understood the principles, while others argue it was just luck and repetition. Personally, I think when you can turn a desert into an ice farm, you've earned the right to call yourself a genius. But let's pause for a second. You're still standing there, right? Sand under your feet, the night cold now curling around your ankles. You hear the crackle of thin ice breaking, the soft grunt of a man hauling a frozen sheet from a shallow pond. Above, the stars blink like smug little witnesses. Somewhere in the distance, a camel sneezes, because even camels get surprised when they see ice in the desert. First joke of the night. If camels had Instagram, this would have gone viral in 500 BCE. At Desert Chill. You watch as the workers load the ice onto sledges, dragging it toward the yawning mouth of the Yakchal. It vanishes inside that cool darkness like treasure slipping into a vault. The night will end soon, and the sun will rise like an uninvited guest at a dinner party. But the ice will stay, hidden and smug, waiting for the first noble to demand a chilled sherbet. So next time someone tells you humans didn't start thinking about refrigeration until the 19th century, you can smile and say, buddy, the Persians were already making frosty cocktails while your ancestors were figuring out how to bang two rocks together. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other secrets did the desert swallow? And if you think that's impressive, wait until you see how the Persians supercharged this natural freezing trick. They didn't just stop at ponds and pits. They built a whole network of cooling systems, wind catchers, tunnels, and airflow hacks that make your modern AC look like a glorified desk fan. And yes, that's coming next. You stand there, watching the last sheet of ice disappear into the Yakchal's yawning mouth, when something catches your eye. a squat tower jutting from the ground a short distance away, like a fat chimney pointing at the heavens. At first glance, it seems random, maybe part of some ruined wall. But no, this is no accident. This is where Persian engineering levels up. The wind catcher, or as they called it, the badger, literally wind grabber. You wander closer, and it looms taller than you expected, rising like a sentinel from the baked earth. Slits run along its sides, gaping like the mouths of silent trumpets. You peer inside one, and the breeze slips over your cheek, soft but purposeful, like a secret trying to escape. And here's the kicker. This isn't decorative. This is a passive air conditioning system. Thousands of years before anyone thought of plugging a unit into a wall. And it worked without burning a single ounce of fuel. Let that sink in while your electricity bill sobs quietly in the background. So, how did it work? Simple. Well, simple if your brain operates at genius level. The wind catcher tower rose above the buildings to snag the faintest whisper of a breeze, funneling it downward into underground channels. Those channels, in turn, connected to the yakchal, or to the lower levels of Persian homes. And down there, the air cooled as it brushed past the damp earth and water surfaces, like nature's own evaporative cooler. By the time it reached you, it was a soft, chilled breath from the underworld. You're standing in the desert, and yet a cool breeze kisses your neck. Tell me that doesn't sound like sorcery disguised as engineering. But the Persians didn't stop there. Nope. They paired wind catchers with qanats, subterranean aqueducts running for miles under the desert floor. These qanats brought cold groundwater from distant mountains, snaking silently beneath the villages, cooling the tunnels as they flowed. When the breeze from the wind catcher met the moisture from the qanat, you had, well, the ancient equivalent of central air. Picture it. Wealthy Persians lounging on silk cushions in the dead of summer, sipping sherbet, and probably talking smack about Greeks, while an invisible river of cold air curls around their ankles. And we thought Dyson fans were fancy. Now, here's a quirky detail for you. Some of these tunnels were so elaborate that workers claimed you could whisper at one end and be heard at the other, miles away. Imagine being a Persian teenager using a qanat as your version of texting. Hey, bring more ice for the party. And if that doesn't make you smile, here's another oddity. Sometimes they used smoke tests to check airflow. Light a fire at the tunnel entrance, and if the smoke slithered in the right direction, the cooling system was primed and ready. That's commitment, folks. Meanwhile, you get annoyed when your smart thermostat doesn't sync with your phone. Historians are still debating whether these interconnected systems, wind catchers, qanats, and yakchals, were planned as one grand design, or if they evolved piecemeal. Was there a single mastermind who said, let's build an eco-friendly cooling empire? Or did it just, happen? Nobody knows for sure. But honestly, who cares? The result was spectacular. Entire cities breathing with the desert, beating the heat without a single watt of electricity. Tell me, that's not genius wrapped in mud and sweat. You tilt your head back and watch the tower sigh into the sky. Imagine standing here centuries ago under the same burning sun, yet feeling the hush of coolness wrapping around you like a whispered promise. The badger hums in silence, It slits, grinning smugly, because it knows it's still relevant. Architects today study these structures, stealing secrets for sustainable design. Zero energy, zero carbon footprint. Persia was green before green was a hashtag. Now, let's talk about the drama of construction. Building these systems wasn't child's play. Workers dug qanats by hand, carving tunnels deep into the earth, often crawling for miles in darkness, lit by flickering oil lamps. It was dangerous, back-breaking work. Sometimes the tunnels collapsed. Sometimes they hit no water at all. And yet, they kept going, driven by a vision of life in the furnace made bearable by cold. Imagine crawling in the dark. Your only motivation, the thought of ice clinking in a goblet months later. That's commitment, or insanity. Probably both. You pause, listening to the desert wind humming through the vents. It almost sounds like a flute playing far away, a lullaby for tired travelers. And speaking of travelers, picture a caravan arriving from Babylon. The men wilted from days of heat. They step inside a Persian villa, expecting to melt into puddles. And instead, a blast of cool air, like an invisible butler saying, "Welcome, gentlemen. Please leave your sandals at the door." You can almost hear the gasps, the murmurs, the silent realization that Persia wasn't just an empire of swords and silk. It was an empire of innovation. And here's a little humor for you. What do you think the first Persian to experience a wind catcher said? Probably something like, "Whoa, is this witchcraft? Or do we owe this guy money?" Fast forward to today, and we still get excited when someone invents a fan that looks like a ring. Humanity, easily impressed for 5,000 years. But don't wander off yet, because while the wind catcher and qanat are marvels, the true heart of this story still beats inside the Yakchal. Its domed belly wasn't just a fridge, it was a temple of survival, a pantry of power. What happened inside those cool, earthen walls? Who controlled the ice? And what did it mean for the people who depended on it? Grab that thought, hold it close, because next, we're stepping into the belly of the beast. A place where frost clung to the walls, while the desert outside roared like a furnace. And trust me, it's going to feel like stepping into a secret winter carved from clay. You duck your head as you step into the shadowy entrance of the Yakchal, and immediately the light dies. The desert sun, loud and brash outside, is replaced by a dim, dusty glow leaking from a high vent in the dome. For a moment, your eyes don't adjust. The air feels different here. Thick, moist, a little earthy. And then it hits you. The coolness. Not just less hot, but genuinely cool. Like the first whiff of an air-conditioned room after an August sidewalk. In the middle of a Persian desert, this is witchcraft. Only it's not. It's engineering at its most stubborn and beautiful. Your sandals scuff against packed clay as you descend a gentle slope. The floor curves downward, spiraling slightly, until you're standing inside the belly of the dome. You pause, tilting your head back, and what you see makes your breath catch. The ceiling soars above, like an inverted bowl, its surface rippling with faint ridges, each one hand-sculpted centuries ago. There's no paint, no ornaments, just raw, sun-baked clay whispering a single message. We beat the heat. The walls are thick, 2 meters, sometimes more. An earthen armor that laughs in the face of 45-degree summers. And they're not just solid lumps of mud, they're masterpieces of layered insulation. First, a base of mud bricks, then sarouj, the magical Persian plaster mixed from clay, lime, ash, and, oh yes, goat hair. Why goat hair? Because apparently it made the mixture bond like cosmic glue. Imagine stirring a giant bowl of ancient construction smoothie. Clay for structure, lime for strength, ash for waterproofing, and a sprinkle of goat hair for durability. Honestly, it sounds like a recipe straight from a desert cooking show. As you run your fingers along the gritty wall, you notice something else. A faint dampness, like the ghost of water that once kissed this surface. You crouch down, peering into a corner, and there it is, a hollow pit, lined with the same sarouj, deep enough to swallow a small wagon. This was the storage chamber, where ice slept through blistering summers like a dragon hoarding treasure. Workers stacked it in layers, padding it with straw or sawdust to slow the melt. They say if you packed it just right, the ice could last until autumn, even beyond. Think about that. Months of survival, carved from a single night of frost. You breathe in, and the air smells faintly of clay, damp straw, and something metallic, maybe the echo of ancient tools. It's eerily quiet. Your footsteps echo like whispers, bouncing off curved walls. And in this silence, you can almost hear the ghosts of men who toiled here, carrying blocks of ice on their backs, grunting as they vanished into the cool dark. Imagine that. The sun outside blazing like a vengeful god while you shuffle into this calm cavern, your arms wrapped around a chunk of frozen moonlight. That had to feel like carrying a piece of heaven. Now, let's talk design brilliance for a second. The dome isn't just pretty, it's a thermal weapon. Its curved shape reduces heat gain by minimizing surface exposure. Hot air? It rises to the top and escapes through the vent, like a lazy villain slinking out of a party. Cool air? It clings low, wrapping itself around the ice pit like a protective blanket. And those tiny vents you saw earlier? They acted like traffic cops for the breeze, channeling drafts through the interior to keep temperatures in check. No fans, no wires, just geometry and gravity doing the tango. Here's a strange little detail. Some yakchals had floors sloped toward a drainage channel because melting ice meant water. And water, in Persia, was liquid gold. Nothing went to waste. They captured that meltwater, piping it through underground qanats to irrigate gardens or supply kitchens. So yeah, your modern fridge? It drips condensation and cries into a plastic tray. The yakchal? It created a whole ecosystem. Overachiever much? And if you're wondering, who got to enjoy all this ice? Well, not everyone. Sure, some yakchals were communal, but let's be real. Ice was luxury. Royals and nobles hogged most of it, turning chilled drinks into a summer flex. Picture a Persian king reclining on a jewel-encrusted couch, sipping sherbet chilled with desert ice, while some poor messenger runs in from the sun looking like a roasted raisin. Ice wasn't just a comfort, it was power, a symbol that screamed, "We own the desert, we bend heat to our will." Now, let's not romanticize too much. Life inside these domes wasn't glamorous for everyone. Workers labored in the dark, hauling ice blocks like human forklifts. The floors were slippery, the air damp, and sometimes snakes crawled in because, hey, even reptiles love a cool vacation. Second joke of the night. Imagine explaining to your boss that you couldn't finish stacking ice because a cobra beat you to the cold spot. And here's something academic for you. Historians still argue about whether Persians designed these domes purely by intuition, or if they had a scientific grasp of concepts like adiabatic cooling and thermal mass. Some claim they understood the math. Others say they just learned from trial and error. Either way, when your structure lasts for 2,500 years and still works, you've earned bragging rights. Meanwhile, half our modern buildings can't survive a decade without repairs. You take another breath, savoring the hush, imagining what it must have been like in its prime. Ice stacked high, straw crunching underfoot, droplets glistening like jewels in the gloom. Outside, the sun still rages, but in here, it's a secret winter carved out of dust and dreams. And as you run your hand over the cold clay, you can't help but think, maybe this wasn't just storage. Maybe this was hope itself, built brick by brick in a world where hope could melt as fast as ice in the sun. But don't linger too long. There's more to uncover, because these domes didn't rise from the earth alone. They were born from recipes whispered by generations, secrets of sarouj, sweat, and strange ingredients. And that's where we're going next. The alchemy of mud, lime, and donkey hair. Yes, donkey hair. Trust me, it's going to get weird and wonderful. You step back into the sunlight, blinking as the heat slaps you across the face like an angry chef with a hot pan. The yakchal looms behind you now, quiet and smug, its walls holding secrets that modern engineers still scratch their heads over. And speaking of secrets, how do you even build something like that? How do you create a fortress that keeps winter locked inside while the outside world boils like soup? The answer lies in recipes. Not the kind you'd use for kebabs or baklava, but recipes for survival. And trust me, these were as guarded as Grandma's secret stew formula. The magic ingredient? A material so legendary, it deserves its own fan club. Sarouj. Sarouj was no ordinary plaster. It was the Avengers of building materials. A dream team mix of clay, lime, ash, sand, goat hair, and sometimes donkey hair. Yes, you heard that right. Donkey hair. Now, you're probably thinking, what were they doing? Building a wall or styling a medieval wig? But this was pure genius. The animal fibers acted like ancient rebar, binding the mix so it wouldn't crack when temperatures went from frying pan hot to ice bath cold. Add lime for strength, ash for waterproofing, and clay for structure, and you had a plaster that could outlive dynasties. Picture the scene. Workers kneeling in the dust, bare arms streaked with mud and sweat, mixing this strange cocktail in massive pits. The air smells sharp, lime stinging your nose, wet clay sticking to your feet like needy toddlers. Someone shouts for more goat hair, and a boy trots over with a bundle, grinning because, let's be honest, throwing donkey hair into a mud mix feels oddly rebellious. Then they slather the sarouj onto walls, layer after layer, until the dome glistens in the sun like a colossal earthen jewel. When it dried, it became harder than your ex's heart and just as waterproof as your best raincoat. Here's where it gets weird. The mixture wasn't just practical. It was ritualistic. There are whispers in Persian folklore that builders chanted while mixing, believing it would make the walls breathe better. Superstition? Maybe. But hey, when your refrigerator needs to last for centuries, a little chanting can't hurt. And honestly, it's hard not to imagine those voices echoing under the desert sky, mingling with the bleats of goats and the rhythmic slap of mud against brick. And let's talk about insulation. That dome you admired earlier wasn't just a pretty hump in the sand. It was a thermal marvel. Those walls could be 2 meters thick, trapping cool like a miser hoarding gold. And beneath that, layers of sarouge sealed every pore, keeping water from leaking out and heat from creeping in. You know those modern ads, bragging about triple insulation technology? Persia was like, hold my sherbet. Oh, and here's a detail that will make you grin. Some yakchals had decorative flourishes. Simple, yes, but deliberate. Wavy patterns etched into the plaster, little geometric grooves along the base. Why? Historians speculate it wasn't just for looks. These grooves helped channel rainwater away or reduce cracks during heat expansion. Practicality dressed as art. Persian architecture in a nutshell. Or should I say, in a mudshell. First joke of the night. Imagine a Persian contractor saying, "Don't worry, it's not just strong, it's aesthetic." But let's zoom out for a second. Building a yakchal wasn't just about mixing goo and stacking bricks. It was a community effort, a symphony of sweat. Skilled masons plotted curves with terrifying precision because a single wrong angle could turn your dome into a sad, lopsided pancake. Laborers carried baskets of wet sarouge up ramps, their backs bent, muscles taut, chanting to keep rhythm. And in the middle of all this, an overseer, maybe with a fancy turban and an ego to match, barking orders like, "No, no, more donkey hair. We're making ice, not soup." Now, imagine this going on for weeks, even months, under a sun that doesn't know the meaning of mercy. Dust coating your throat, flies buzzing like unpaid interns. Your only reward, a gulp of tepid water. And yet, when the dome finally stood, smooth and proud against the horizon, the entire village probably cheered. Why? Because that structure wasn't just a building. It was a promise, a silent guarantee that when summer turned cruel, they'd still taste cold water, still bite into crisp fruit, still feel a shiver, even as the desert burned. That dome was hope baked into clay. And yes, the donkey hair stayed, forever, locked inside those walls like a shaggy little guardian. Makes you think, doesn't it? Somewhere in the heart of a Persian desert, a yakchal still stands, and inside its walls, a piece of donkey DNA is chilling, literally, for 2,500 years. Talk about a weird legacy. Historians argue whether sarouj was an original Persian invention or adapted from earlier Mesopotamian techniques. Some swear Persians perfected it. Others say it was a lucky mix of curiosity and necessity. Either way, when your building outlives entire empires, you've earned the right to call yourself an innovator. Meanwhile, your modern drywall peels if you look at it wrong. You step back from the dome, squinting at its sunlit curve. It glows like a baked loaf of bread, smooth and unyielding. You can almost hear the whispers of masons long gone, proud of their handiwork, laughing at the idea that one day someone would pay a fortune for eco-cooling systems. while their ancient invention just worked. No electricity, no Wi-Fi, no smart nonsense. Just dirt, hair, and genius. But hold on, don't wander off yet. Because as much as this was a feat of engineering, it was also a story of people. The villagers who built it, the kings who funded it, and the lucky few who licked the icy fruits of its labor. Who were they? What did chilled luxury mean in an empire of sand? Let's meet them, face to face, over sherbet and stories, in the next part. The desert wind hums low like a restless drum as you wander toward the sound of laughter. It's faint at first, drifting across the dunes like perfume, until you crest a ridge and see them. People. Not kings, not nobles, just ordinary Persians moving like ants in the golden light. Men with broad shoulders and dust-streaked turbans. Women balancing jars on hips, as if their spines were carved from cedar. Children dart between legs, their giggles slicing through the hot stillness like little bells. You pause, watching as they gather around the base of a yakchal, not for worship, not for ceremony, but for work. This was life, sweat, grit, and the stubborn will to wrestle cold from the jaws of fire. Some men hoist sacks of straw, their tunics damp with effort, while others drag blocks of ice on sledges, the frost shimmering against the sun like captive stars. A pair of boys squat in the dust, chewing on dates, their faces glowing with that mix of boredom and awe only kids can pull off. You can almost hear them whisper, "This is where the cold sleeps." And here's the thing. You start to realize these structures weren't just engineering marvels. They were social hubs. The yakchal was the beating heart of the village, a cool, lung-pumping relief into lives otherwise smothered by heat. The harvest of ice wasn't just labor, it was an event. Families showed up, laughter tangled with the grunt of work, gossip blooming in the shade. "Did you hear about Allie's new donkey?" someone mutters as they stack straw. "Oh, the one that eats figs like a prince?" Cue laughter, deep and rolling like distant thunder. Now, let's talk about the architects, those mysterious figures who designed this clay colossus. Were they lone geniuses, sketching plans under flickering oil lamps? Or teams of masons passing knowledge like sacred scripture? Historians still bicker about it. Some claim master builders traveled across Persia, spreading the gospel of Saruj and wind catchers, their reputations glowing like desert sunsets. Others think this knowledge simmered locally, born from necessity and sharpened by trial and error. Either way, these architects were rock stars in a world where beating the heat wasn't a lifestyle, it was survival. And don't think for a second the elite weren't involved. Oh no. Behind every yakchal stood someone with coin, clout, and a craving for luxury colder than gossip in a royal court. Kings, governors, and silk-draped nobles bankrolled these domes. Because let's be real, what's the point of ruling half the known world if you can't sip chilled rosewater while peasants sweat like overworked goats? Picture it, a Persian aristocrat reclining on cushions stuffed with peacock feathers, goblet in hand, condensation beating like tiny diamonds on its rim. Outside, the desert howls. Inside, he smirks, thinking, "Take that, son." Ice was status. It was wealth carved into frozen slabs, stacked like silent coins in the vault of a yakchal. To own ice in July? That was the ultimate flex. Forget gold bangles or gem-crusted daggers. Real power was handing a guest a chilled sorbet while everyone else gnawed on lukewarm figs. And you'd better believe this trickled down to politics. Whispers say alliances were sealed over bowls of falude, the Persian iced dessert that still melts hearts today. Imagine two rival governors clinking goblets of pomegranate sherbet, frost swirling like diplomacy in a cup. And then there were the workers, the unsung heroes with calloused palms and sun-scorched brows who trudged through sandstorms, hauling blocks of ice like silent titans. They weren't sipping sherbet in silk. They were earning survival, one slab at a time. And here's a fun, if slightly morbid, detail. Some Persian texts hint that ice transport was so brutal, accidents happened. Ice slipped, men fell, bones cracked. No Instagram glamour here, just raw, bone-deep toil. Yet they kept going, because each block stored in that dome meant another day their children wouldn't wilt in the furnace of summer. Now, lean in, here comes the twist. Among these laborers and lords were storytellers, weaving myths around the Yakchal. Some swore the dome housed a spirit, a keeper of cold, a ghost of winter chained in clay. Kids dared each other to peek inside at night, whispering that if you heard the spirit sigh, winter rains would bless the land. Was it true? Who knows? But when survival depends on forces you can't see, you invent stories to keep the darkness and the heat at bay. You glance around the scene one more time, and it hits you. This wasn't just architecture. It was culture, ambition, obsession. A village bending its spine to defy the desert, an empire flaunting its genius in the face of nature. And as you watch a merchant saunter by, fanning himself lazily, you can almost hear his thoughts. Greek philosophers? Cute. But do they have ice in August? Second joke of the night. If ancient Persia had Yelp, every Yakchal would have 5 stars and a review saying, "Chill vibes, literally." But here's where it gets even juicier. Because ice wasn't just for bragging. It greased the wheels of commerce. It shaped trade, influenced routes, maybe even altered wars. And that, my sleepy friend, is exactly where we're heading next. So, take a sip of your imaginary sherbet. Let the desert sun fade in your mind, and follow me deeper into this chilly rabbit hole, where frost met fortune in a dance that spanned an empire. The air is still warm as you drift further into the story, but there's a hum now, faint, like distant wheels grinding over sand. A caravan is approaching, a river of camels swaying under the weight of spice sacks and silk bundles. Their bells tinkle softly, their hooves kicking up golden dust as merchants in embroidered robes plod alongside, eyes scanning the horizon for a sight sweeter than gold, a cluster of domes rising like mirages of promise. Yakchals, cold storage in a land that knows nothing of mercy. Trade wasn't just about moving goods. It was about keeping them alive. Fresh grapes, figs, herbs. Without preservation, they turned to mush faster than you can say falude. Enter the Yakchal, the unsung hero of the Silk Road era. These giant mud vaults didn't just cool sherbet for aristocrats. They underpinned an economy. They let traders haul perishable goods across infernos of sand and still have something worth selling on the other side. Think of them as ancient Persian freezer hubs, strategically placed near caravan stops. Globalization, but make it clay. Ice wasn't just luxury anymore. It became currency. People bartered for it. Blocks of frozen desert night traveled from mountain-fed ponds to domes, and from domes to bustling bazaars. Imagine the scene: a merchant haggling under an awning, his voice rising like heat waves. "This melon? Cut it open, still crisp," he boasts, slapping its side like a used car salesman. Customers lean in, eyes wide, because a cold melon in July? That's basically edible sorcery. Deals were struck, fortunes made, all because someone figured out how to bully nature into submission. And then there were the royals, the original influencers of luxury trends. When kings flaunted frosty sherbets at summer banquets, courtiers scrambled to copy. Ice became the Persian equivalent of having the newest iPhone, a status badge so dazzling it made poets swoon. We even have snippets from ancient verse praising sherbet chilled as snow on mountain peaks. Meanwhile, your ancestors were probably gnawing on room-temperature barley cakes in some damp European hut. Sorry, Europe, but let's not sugarcoat it. Ice was also a weapon of politics. Governors sent slabs of it as diplomatic gifts, packed in straw and hauled across blistering plains. Picture a sweaty envoy staggering into a rival court, lugging a chest that drips like a guilty conscience. He throws it open, and bam! Shards of ice glint under torchlight. The room gasps. Instant prestige points unlocked. Forget sending flowers. Persians were out here sending glaciers. And you thought your Amazon Prime deliveries were fancy. Of course, this frosty trade wasn't easy. Transporting ice in a desert was like smuggling chocolate through a sauna. Camels groaned under the burden of dripping cargo, straw cradles sagged, and every hour shaved ounces from your precious block. One wrong route, one sandstorm, and poof, your ice turned into a very expensive puddle. Merchants gambled fortunes on timing, praying to gods of shade and cool winds. Some even traveled at night, slipping like ghosts under the moon, to keep their loads from melting under the day's savage glare. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some texts suggest ice sellers in Persia had secret techniques to slow melting, like coating blocks in mixtures of ash and hay for extra insulation. Others whisper about shady deals, ice being watered down, literally, to cheat buyers. Imagine the outrage. You call this a full block? It's half meltwater, you crook. Ancient Yelp would have been lit. First joke of the night here. Would not recommend. Ice arrived lukewarm. 2 stars. Delivery camel was rude. And this wasn't just a Persian obsession. Word of these domes and their frosty bounty spread along trade routes faster than gossip in a palace. Travelers carried tales to India, to Arabia, even to the Mediterranean. Have you seen it? In Persia, they have cold in summer. It sounded like a fairy tale, a mirage woven into reality. And that reputation? It made Persia more than a kingdom of warriors and poets. It made it a kingdom of comfort, cleverness, and culinary delight. In the cutthroat world of empires, that mattered. You don't just win wars with swords, you win hearts with sorbet. Now, lean back and imagine the climax of a trade day. The bazaar hums like a hive, sun blazing down as merchants unfurl carpets, heap spices, and fan themselves with peacock feathers. Suddenly, someone brings out a bowl of ice-chilled sherbet, pink as dawn and sweet with rosewater. The crowd stirs, Whispers ripple like wind through wheat. Deals pause mid-negotiation. Eyes track the bowl as if it were a holy relic. And for a moment, in this furnace of a world, everyone forgets the weight of dust and the tyranny of heat. That bowl isn't just dessert. It's defiance. It's civilization flexing on chaos. And here's the academic nugget for your brain. Historians still argue over how much these cooling systems shaped Persia's economic dominance. Did they tip trade balances, influence settlement patterns, give Persian cities a seductive edge over rivals? The debate rages on, but one thing's clear. When you can promise travelers a sip of cold water after days of burning thirst, you don't just control a road, you control the dream at the end of it. But don't doze off yet, because if ice was currency, it was also mystery. The Persians didn't just build domes, they wrapped them in ritual and myth, sprinkling the practical with a pinch of the sacred. Priests blessing ice, spirits haunting domes. Oh yes. In the next part, we step into the realm where engineering meets enchantment, and things get weird in the coolest way possible. The sun slides lower, smearing the desert in molten gold as you wander deeper into Persia's icy enigma. So far, you've seen the practical, the yakchal, the wind catchers, the clever physics masquerading as magic. But here's the thing about humans. When we stumble upon something extraordinary, something that feels like bending the laws of nature, we don't stop at engineering. We lace it with meaning. And that's how the Yakchal became more than a mud dome. It became a place of whispers, rituals, and maybe ghosts. You approach a Yakchal at twilight, its curved silhouette glowing like an ember against the bruised sky. Shadows stretch long, and the desert hums with that strange, hollow quiet that makes you think the earth is holding its breath. Workers have gone home. No laughter, no chatter, just you, the wind, and a dome that suddenly feels alive. And in a way, to the Persians, it was. They believed cold wasn't just a temperature, it was purity. Fire was chaos, rage, the searing breath of demons. But cold? Cold was serene, divine, the whisper of order in a world baked by fury. So before the first ice of the season slid into the Yakchal's belly, priests often came to bless the vault. They carried torches that flickered like molten tongues, muttering prayers in the old Zoroastrian cadences, calling on Ahura Mazda, the great god of light and wisdom, to guard the sacred frost. Picture that. Holy men trailing incense through a mud dome, chanting over blocks of frozen water as if they were relics from heaven. Some texts hint at rituals that sound half practical, half theatrical. Sprinkling rose water across the chamber to calm the ice spirit, drawing chalk symbols at the threshold to keep heat demons from slinking inside. Was it superstition? Probably. Did it work? Well, the ice didn't complain. And here's the deliciously strange part. Villagers whispered that if the dome cracked, if the ice melted too soon, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a sign. A warning from the gods that balance had broken, that fire was winning the eternal war against chill. Kids, of course, ran wild with these myths. They dared each other to creep inside the Yakchal at midnight, claiming you could hear the ice spirit sigh, a long, cold breath curling through the dark. Some swore they saw figures moving in the corners, pale as frost, draped in silence. Were they ghosts of builders, guardians of winter, or just kids scaring each other silly while their parents dozed under the stars? Who knows? But admit it, you'd be tempted to go listen for that sigh, wouldn't you? First joke of the night. Imagine Persian parents inventing this ghost story just to keep kids from sneaking in and eating the ice like ancient popsicles. And it didn't stop with blessings and bedtime tales. Ice made its way into ritual life. During Nowruz, the Persian New Year, blocks were brought out, chipped into sparkling shards to chill celebratory drinks. Frost in a goblet became a symbol of renewal, of life's sweet defiance against the desert's death grip. In some regions, offerings of snow water were poured at shrines, the liquid trickling like veins of grace into the thirsty earth. Was it practical hydration? Sure. Was it also poetry? Absolutely. Now, lean closer, because here's where it gets almost conspiratorial. Certain Persian chronicles hint, just hint, that these domes weren't entirely secular. Some yakchals, especially those near royal estates, had restricted access, not because they were worried about thieves, but because what they stored wasn't always just ice. Imagine vaults doubling as treasure caches or secret meeting chambers. Cool, dark, silent, the perfect hiding place. And if anyone asked, "Oh, that? Just the king's ice pit." History loves a good double life, doesn't it? Meanwhile, the academics squabble over this mystical angle. Some claim it's all romantic exaggeration, layered onto mud and straw. Others argue that for an empire obsessed with elemental dualities, fire versus water, heat versus cold, of course the yakchal was spiritual real estate. Personally, I think when you build a snow vault in a desert, you earn the right to believe it's holy. I mean, if your fridge hummed hymns, wouldn't you bow a little? And then there's this odd detail. Travelers' accounts from later centuries describe locals tracing symbols on the outer walls. Spirals, suns, crescents, as if warding off some unseen threat. Was it heat they feared? Or envy? Maybe both. Because envy was real. Other nations gawked at Persia's icy wizardry, muttering accusations of sorcery while fanning themselves in sweaty despair. You can almost hear the gossip. Did you hear? The Persians trap winter spirits in clay domes. Meanwhile, the Persians just sip sherbet, smiling like villains in a silk-draped lounge. You tilt your head, studying the dome's curve in the twilight. The sky above melts into indigo. And for a second, you swear the structure exhales. A soft draft curling past your cheek, cool and perfumed with memory. Rational mind says it's the wind slipping through vents, but another part of you, the part that still believes in whispers and wonders, thinks maybe, just maybe, the ice spirit is real and it's smiling. But before you drift too far into ghost stories, let's pull you back to reality, because the next scene is nothing short of spectacular. Rituals aside, the yakchal wasn't just a vault. It was a stage for decadence. The Persians didn't hoard cold. They flaunted it, turning frost into festival, ice into art. Picture sherbets swirling like jeweled galaxies, chilled wine gleaming in golden cups. Hungry yet? Good, because next, we're crashing the ultimate ice feast of the Persian kings. Bring your appetite and maybe a silk napkin. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. The desert outside is a furnace, waves of heat shimmering like molten glass. But here, in the royal pavilion, shadows ripple across silk canopies, and a breeze sighs through carved screens. You're standing at the edge of a Persian feast, and let me tell you, this isn't just dinner. This is an event. The air is perfumed with rosewater and saffron, torches flicker like molten stars, and servants glide like shadows carrying trays that glitter under the lamplight. Now look, there, at the center, a long table sprawls like a jeweled river laden with dishes that would make a modern foodie weep. Bowls of pistachios and almonds, dates glistening like brown pearls, roasted lamb steaming on silver platters. But your eyes don't stop there. No, because the real showstopper is sitting on that ebony tray, a bowl frosted with rime, delicate as a winter morning. Inside, a swirl of falude, thin, vermicelli-like noodles of starch soaked in sweet syrup, perfumed with rosewater, crowned with a wedge of lime so green it could shame emeralds. This isn't just dessert. It's art carved from frost. And here's the wild thing. This isn't happening in some icy northern palace. This is Persia, where outside, the sand could fry an egg faster than you can say, bon appetit. And yet here they are, sipping sherbet so cold they make your teeth ache, like it's the most casual thing in the world. How? You know the answer by now. The yakshal, humming quietly in the background, like the unsung hero of this decadent opera. The servants move swiftly, their copper trays catching the lamplight like molten suns. Goblets clink, laughter ripples like music, and someone plucks a tune on a santer, the notes shimmering like glass beads tumbling down a silk scarf. You settle into a cushion, sinking deep into the plush folds as a cup of something pale and glittering slides into your hand. You lift it. Oh, the chill bites your fingers like a playful fox. You take a sip. Sweet, sharp, a breath of snowstorm crashing against your tongue, leaving you blinking in disbelief. And then you laugh softly, because you realize Persia didn't just invent refrigeration. They invented the humble brag served over ice. See, for the royals, ice wasn't just refreshment. It was status on a spoon. A way to whisper, "Look at me, I control the seasons." And oh, they flaunted it. Banquets stretched long into the night, with poets spinning verses about sherbet, cold as the breath of dawn, while dancers swayed like flames around low brass lamps. Plates arrived in waves, jujubes, honeyed pomegranates, melons carved into roses, all resting against frosty shards like tropical fruits reclining on glaciers. If Instagram had existed in 500 BCE, this would have broken the algorithm. First joke of the night, hashtag chill with Cyrus. But let's sprinkle in some historical spice. Persian texts hint that the earliest recipes for chilled drinks date back to the Achaemenid dynasty, around 400 BCE. They loved mixing snow or ice with fruit juices, honey, and herbs, sometimes even wine if they were feeling particularly rebellious. And no, it wasn't all fancy frou-frou. There's evidence these icy delights showed up during royal military campaigns, packed in straw and hauled across brutal landscapes so generals could sip victory with a side of frost. Imagine leading an army across burning plains and pausing to say, "Yes, fetch me the pomegranate slushy, would you?" Power move of the millennium. Now, let's stir in the weird. because what's history without a little gossip? Some accounts claim that these feasts included snow challenges, where guests competed to sculpt figures from ice or craft elaborate frozen towers. Was it true? Historians shrug, arguing over whether it was fact or poetic fluff. But admit it, you kind of want to believe some ancient nobleman tried to impress the queen with an ice swan, only for it to collapse mid-toast. Second joke of the night, and that, dear friends, is how the first Persian snowman melted faster than royal patience. And here's something even more controversial. Scholars debate whether the Persians invented proto-ice cream. Some swear falude was the OG frozen dessert, a sweet symphony of noodles and syrup, chilled in yakchals, long before gelato strutted onto the stage in Renaissance Italy. Others say, calm down, it was just flavored ice. Honestly, I vote Team Persia. Because when your ancestors are eating frosty noodles in the desert, while others are gnawing on warm porridge, you win. Case closed. But pause for a second. Zoom out. These feasts weren't just culinary flexes. They were political theater. Imagine a visiting envoy sinking his teeth into chilled melon for the first time in his sun-scorched life. You can almost hear the gasp, see the flicker in his eyes as the realization dawns. These people don't just conquer with swords, they conquer with comfort. In a world where survival was a daily brawl, Persia served opulence on ice. And that was the kind of soft power that didn't just win wars. It rewrote the rules of civilization. You lean back, your imaginary sherbet melting like starlight on your tongue, and the sounds of the feast blur into a lullaby of clinks and murmurs. The fire outside still rages, but in here, winter dances across bronze trays, laughing softly at the sun. And you wonder, did anyone at that table, sipping frozen rose water under a canopy of stars, realize they were part of something timeless? That millennia later, people would whisper their names, craving a taste of that frosted dream. Don't slip into sleep yet, because if the Persians turned frost into theater, they also turned engineering into strategy. The yakchal didn't just cool sherbet, it shaped wars, settlements, and maybe even tipped the scales of empire. In the next part, we dive into the shadowy duel between man and sun, and how Persia made heat bow in surrender. The music from that royal feast fades like a dream as you step outside, back into the raw blaze of the Persian desert. The night's chill has fled, and the sun is back in full tyrant mode, glaring down like it owns the place. But here's the twist. Out here, heat wasn't the master. Not anymore. Because the Persians? They cracked the code. They tamed the sun with mud, wind, and a stubborn streak that would make your gym coach blush. And this wasn't just about sherbet and showing off, oh no. This was about power. Picture an empire sprawling across mountains, rivers, and deserts. A patchwork of climates stitched together under the banner of the Achaemenids. Roads stretched like veins, carrying armies, goods, and gossip across thousands of miles. But every mile had an enemy, heat. It blistered skin, soured food, and turned fresh water into lukewarm misery. For soldiers, that wasn't an inconvenience. It was a killer. Armies don't march on empty stomachs, and they sure don't fight well when their bread rots and their wine tastes like hot soup. Enter the yakchal, the silent strategist. Those domes didn't just feed festivals, they fed campaigns. They preserved rations, chilled water, and sometimes even stored medicines and herbs that would have withered under the sun's tyranny. Imagine trudging across the dashed Kavir, armor sizzling, your tongue a cracked desert in your mouth. And then, at an outpost, a soldier hands you a cup of cool water. That wasn't just hydration. That was morale in a clay cup. And in war, morale is half the battle. Some historians argue these cooling systems were the logistical backbone of Persia's dominance. Others scoff, saying, "Don't romanticize mud huts." But let's be real. When you can move fresh grapes across a wasteland while your enemies gnaw on dry dates, you've already won the snack war. And in an empire that thrived on trade, ice wasn't a party trick. It was leverage. Picture this: a rival envoy sweating under his turban while Persian diplomats sipped chilled rosewater in front of him. Subtle flex? Absolutely. A power move? You bet your frosty melon it was. And it wasn't just politics. It was psychology. Heat is cruel. It drains. It crushes. It whispers, "Give up." But the Persians built little pockets of winter in the furnace, places where weary travelers could collapse in cool shadows, sip from jars that sweat like shy lovers, and remember that life could still be gentle. That kind of relief, it breeds loyalty. It roots cities in sand. It says, stay, build, thrive. And so they did. Now, let's toss in a juicy debate for the night owls in the academic crowd. Did Persia's mastery of climate control give it a military edge? Some claim yes, that the ability to store food and keep troops fresh tilted the scales in desert warfare. Others roll their eyes, pointing to big, shiny reasons like cavalry and roads. But maybe it's not either or. Maybe it's both. Because an empire isn't just built on swords. It's built on small mercies. A sip of cold water, a shadowed dome, a whisper of breeze where death expected silence. And here's a thought that'll make your modern brain twitch. While the Persians were hacking thermodynamics with domes and wind catchers, most of the world was still fumbling with fire pits and soggy grain sacks. They weren't just ahead, they were in a different league. The Greeks, for all their marble swagger, had nothing like this. Rome? Don't even start. Sure, they had aqueducts, but chilled desserts in the desert? Persia beat them by centuries. Next time someone rants about Western civilization being the cradle of innovation, slide this little icy dagger into the chat. First joke of the night. Persia called, they want their sherbet back. But before you start writing odes to Saruj and donkey hair, let's not ignore the obvious. This wasn't just about outsmarting the sun. It was about pride. The Persians didn't settle for surviving. They wanted to own the elements. They wanted to sip snow while the desert howled, and they did for centuries. Until they didn't. Because here's the sad, sandy truth. Even genius fades. Even domes crack. Empires fall. And with them, their marvels sink into silence. The yakchals that once throbbed with life are now ghosts, half buried under dunes, their secrets nibbled by time. But not yet. Not for you. Because before we mourn their bones, we need to dig into the mystery of their disappearance and the long sleep that turned these icy vaults into relics. So stay with me. Take one more sip of coolness in your mind, because the desert is about to reclaim its crown, and you'll want to see how frost turns to dust. You leave the echo of that cool chamber behind, and step into a harsher reality, the march of time. The empire that once bent heat to its will is fading like twilight on the dunes. The Achaemenids fall, dynasties rise and crumble, but the Yakchals remain, silent, stubborn, clinging to relevance as centuries swirl like sandstorms. And yet, even giants can't stand forever. So what happened? Why did these mud domes, these marvels of ancient engineering, slip into obscurity? First, lean in and listen, because the answer isn't loud, it's slow. It begins with whispers of change, roads shifting, trade routes bending like reeds in the wind. When the Silk Road's pulse weakens, caravans stop seeking out the desert domes for cold relief. Commerce, the lifeblood that kept these icy lungs breathing, starts to trickle and thin. And without the hum of trade, the Yakchal becomes less a fortress of frost and more an empty husk, echoing with memories of Sherbet's past. Then comes the bite of politics. Empires fracture, wars gnaw at borders, and priorities tilt from luxury to survival. Who cares about ice when swords are flashing and cities are burning? Taxes skyrocket, peasants groan, and the labor once poured into patching cracks and mixing sarouge now bleeds into building fortifications. A dome left untended in the desert is a doomed dome. Heat eats at it, wind claws at its curves, and slowly, so slowly, it begins to sag. But wait, it's not just politics, it's technology. As centuries crawl toward modernity, new ways to cool creep in. Wells deepen, irrigation spreads, and by the time mechanical refrigeration tiptoes onto the stage, the Yakchal is a relic, an old soldier dismissed without ceremony. By the 19th century, ice is harvested industrially, shipped by steamers, stored in warehouses of steel and glass. Mud and donkey hair? Quaint, outdated, forgotten, and yet, not entirely. Because history clings like dust in the corners. Some Yakchals linger, their domes cracked but proud, hunched like stoic elders under the desert sun. Villagers still glance at them with a flicker of reverence. That's where the cold lived, they murmur, as if speaking of a long-dead king. Kids toss pebbles into their gaping throats, laughter ringing where once sherbet chilled in bowls of beaten silver. And deep inside, in some stubborn crevice of clay, you can almost imagine a shard of ancient frost sleeping on, defying time like a secret too proud to melt. Here's the eerie twist. For a while, people forgot what these domes were for. Travelers scribbled notes about strange hive-like structures scattered in Persian sands, scratching their heads at their purpose. Some thought they were tombs, others granaries. One fanciful theory even claimed they were giant ovens, a cosmic joke, if you think about it. Historians chuckle now, but honestly, when you see a cracked clay dome yawning against a sky that burns, would you believe it once held ice? Neither would I. And that's where the academic fireworks start. Scholars argue, did the knowledge vanish completely, or linger in whispers? Was it lost to invasions, or simply abandoned as irrelevant? Some insist nomadic disruptions wiped out the infrastructure. Qanats clogged, wind catchers fell silent. Others say it was economic pragmatism. Why maintain a mud behemoth when iron tanks can do the job faster? The debate flickers on, like an ember refusing to die. But let's step out of the archives and into your imagination. Picture the last days of a yakchal in active use, a weary caretaker patching cracks with trembling hands, muttering old chants out of habit more than faith. The straw smells faint, the ice stack thin. Outside, a sandstorm looms, snarling like an angry beast. And then, darkness. Centuries pass. Silence thickens. The dome sags, sighs, and finally gives in. A rib of clay crumbles. The spirit of cold exhales its last frosty breath into the furnace of time. Melancholy, isn't it? But don't sink too deep into sorrow, because this isn't the end of the tale. Not quite. Because one day, thousands of years later, someone stumbles across these skeletal domes, squints at their alien grace, and asks the question that sparks revolutions in thought. What was this for? And when they dig, when they measure, when they finally understand, awe ripples through the modern world. We thought we were clever with our compressors and coolants, but the Persians? They were hacking sustainability before hashtags were cool. So hold on to that thought, because next, we step into the thrill of rediscovery. The gasp of archaeologists brushing sand off a secret that rewrites the rules of ancient tech. And trust me, it's a moment worth staying awake for, at least for another few minutes. You're standing in the modern day now, or close enough. The roar of camels is gone, replaced by the buzz of drones and the whir of digital cameras. The desert is still here, endless and arrogant, but something else shimmers on the horizon. Curiosity. A caravan of explorers, not with spices and silks this time, but with notebooks and GoPros, crunches across the sand toward a cluster of strange shapes. Crumbling domes half swallowed by dunes, their clay ribs jutting like fossilized bones. At first glance, they look like ruins of some forgotten temple, or maybe alien pods abandoned after a cosmic pit stop. But as archaeologists brush the sand away, measuring arcs, poking at vents, whispering like conspirators, the truth dawns. These aren't tombs. They aren't ovens. They're refrigerators, ancient, audacious refrigerators that once dared to lock winter inside the jaws of summer. Cue the collective gasp of historians everywhere. The rediscovery starts as a trickle, scribbled notes in obscure journals, odd sketches in dusty archives. But then, boom, the dam bursts. Photos hit academic circles like cold water in July. Suddenly, the Yakchal isn't just an oddity, it's a revelation. Architects gape, engineers squint, environmentalists swoon like poets at a sunset. Why? Because these domes weren't just old, they were brilliant. Zero energy, zero emissions, just mud, lime, donkey hair, and audacity. While we pat ourselves on the back for inventing green tech, Persia was out here being eco-chic in 500 BCE. Soon, researchers swarm like bees drunk on pollen. They map every crack, analyze every scrap of sarouge. They drag drones across skies and slip thermal sensors into vents, hunting for clues. And what they find? It's like reading poetry in clay. The thermal dynamics check out. The double-layer insulation, the venting strategy, the underground chambers whispering to Connaught's long dry. This wasn't guesswork. This was design genius encoded in earth and sweat. And here's the kicker. Some domes still work. 2.5 millennia later, a well-preserved Yakchal can still cradle cold if you feed it right. Let that sink in while your modern fridge cries during a blackout. Of course, the academics squabble, because what's history without a good intellectual brawl? Some hail the Yakchal as the first refrigeration system, the granddaddy of chill. Others argue, no, it was just ice storage. The debate spirals into footnotes and heated symposium panels. But the truth doesn't care. The truth stands quiet and smug in the desert sun, wearing a crown of cracked clay and whispering, "We beat the heat before your ancestors figured out soap." Now, let's sprinkle in a detail that'll make your inner geek grin. Modern architects study these domes like gospel, sketching biomimetic models, dreaming of sustainable housing that breathes like a yakchal. Some even propose resurrecting the concept for rural refrigeration in heat-strangled regions, places where power grids sag under the weight of modern hunger. Imagine that, an ancient Persian hack swooping in to save our tech-addled hides. History doesn't just repeat, it flexes. But here's my favorite part: the sheer romance of rediscovery. Picture an archaeologist at dawn, standing ankle-deep in sand, staring at a dome glowing like amber in the rising light. She runs a hand over its weathered skin, feels the grit under her nails, and suddenly, bam, 500 years collapse into dust. She sees it all: workers slapping saruj under a merciless sun, priests whispering blessings over frost, kings sipping sherbet while poets sigh. And for a heartbeat, the desert hums with ghosts, all murmuring the same thing: remember us. Remember what we knew. Now, here's a fun twist. Pop culture catches on. Travel vloggers start hashtagging ancient cool. Influencers pose in front of domes, wearing linen like wannabe royalty. Documentaries drop dramatic lines like, "Before the fridge, there was the Frost Temple." The Yakchal goes viral, strutting across Instagram feeds, while your actual fridge sulks in the corner. First joke of the night. Imagine explaining to an ancient Persian that one day people would pay money to take selfies with their mud dome. History, you spicy little beast. But let's not get lost in the memes. Because the real question, one that keeps humming under all this hype, isn't just how the Persians did it, it's why. Why pour sweat into sculpting winter from mud? Why gamble on ice in a world where survival was already a knife's edge? And the answer is as soft and sharp as the desert wind: because they could. Because the human heart doesn't stop at enough. It reaches for beauty, for mastery, for the quiet thrill of saying, "Look, we tamed the impossible." And that, my sleepy friend, is the drumbeat carrying us into the final act. The Yakchal isn't just a relic, it's a mirror. It shows us who we were, and maybe who we still are: restless, clever, audacious, hungry for control, even in the face of a sun that laughs at our fragility. But hold that thought, because we're not done. Next, we turn the lens from past to present. What can these domes teach us about a planet choking on heat and greed? Could the future of cooling be hidden in a Persian blueprint older than empire dust? Spoiler, yes. And the answer is cooler than you think. You stand at the edge of the desert, the sun sinking like a molten coin, and your mind hums with questions. This isn't just a history lesson anymore. It's a whisper from the past aimed squarely at the present. Because let's face it, the planet is sweating. Cities swelter under heat domes, air conditioners wheeze like asthmatic dragons, and power grids buckle under the demand for cool air. And yet, right here, under this dying light, the answer stares you in the face. Cracked, but proud, a yakchal, a 2,500-year-old blueprint that knew how to keep things cool without burning a single ounce of fuel. Think about it. While we crank up our energy-hungry AC units, ancient Persians were pulling off a balancing act between design, climate, and common sense. No compressors, no humming fans, just earth, wind, and brains tuned to nature's rhythm. They understood something we keep forgetting. If you work with the elements, not against them, you win. The Yakchal wasn't just a building, it was a philosophy in clay. A soft-spoken manifesto that said, adapt, don't dominate. And here's the jaw-dropper. Modern architects are finally listening. In an age of glass towers and steel boxes that gulp electricity like soda, people are looking backward to leap forward. Bioclimatic design, that's the buzzword now. Buildings that breathe like yakchals, channeling wind, sipping shade, shrugging off heat. Researchers study the curvature of those domes, the secret of Saruj, the geometry that made them chill sanctuaries in a sea of fire. Some prototypes are already sprouting. Desert clinics cooled by passive airflow. Storage units lined with earthen plasters. Imagine a future where your house doesn't need AC because it is the AC. Here's a wild thought. Entire cities embracing ancient wisdom. Wind catchers rising like clay sentinels. Roofs swelling into domes. Walls pulsing with the cool patience of Earth. Science fiction? Maybe. But then again, so was the idea of ice in the desert. Until Persia laughed in physics' face and did it anyway. First joke of the night. Meanwhile, we're out here inventing smart fridges that tweet your grocery list. Persians are looking down like, cute. And let's talk sustainability, because it's more than a buzzword. It's a lifeline. Our cooling systems guzzle power, spitting carbon like a dragon with indigestion. Every degree we fight comes at a cost the planet can't afford. But the Yakchal? Zero emissions, locally sourced, fully biodegradable. If the apocalypse hits tomorrow, you can't eat your AC, but you can sure build a Saruj dome and chill a melon in it, practical and poetic. That's a combo no startup can patent. Now, let's sprinkle in an academic nugget. Thermodynamic models show that yakchals achieved interior temps around 5 Celsius, 41 degrees. Even in ambient heat soaring past 40 Celsius, 104 degrees Celsius. All thanks to insulation, evaporative cooling, and smart ventilation. Read that again. Clay, straw, and donkey hair beat modern tech in efficiency per watt because, well, they didn't use watts. That's not nostalgia, that's data. But the story doesn't stop at cooling. The Yakchal whispers something deeper. Resilience. In a world without power grids, without apps, without backup generators, Persians carved comfort out of chaos. They didn't wait for salvation. They built it. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson we need most. When the heat comes for you, don't panic. Innovate. Not with brute force, but with grace. With geometry. With the humility to learn from a clay dome that's outlived empire. You glance at the horizon, and the future flickers there, half dream, half blueprint. Cities shimmering with curves instead of corners, walls that breathe, vents that sing. Children growing up in homes cooled by whispers of wind instead of the growl of machines. It sounds utopian until you remember. It's already been done. It stood in the desert. It worked. It worked for centuries. And now, let's pull the lens tight, because we're almost home. You've wandered through fire and frost, feasted with kings, crouched in the belly of domes, and brushed the dust off forgotten marvels. There's one step left, the last breath of this story. We're going to the edge of memory, to a farewell, carved in clay and light. No more facts, no more debates, just silence, cool and deep, like the heart of a yakchal at midnight. So close your eyes, feel the hush, because next, we let go. The desert is quiet now, a vast ocean of shadow, stretching under a sky salted with stars. The heat has slipped away, hiding behind the mountains, and a soft breath of wind snakes through the dunes like a wandering ghost. You walk slowly, sand crunching underfoot, until you see it, the last yakchal, hulking like a lonely sentinel against the starlight. Its dome glows pale, a cracked pearl resting on the desert's dark throat. You pause at its threshold. The air is cool here, whispering across your skin like an old friend's sigh. You run your fingers over the rough curve of sarouj, feeling the grit crumble slightly under your touch. This wall, this stubborn, silent wall, has outlived kings, wars, empires, and dreams. It has listened to the laughter of laborers, the chants of priests, the murmurs of poets drunk on sherbet. And now, it listens to you, alone, standing in the stillness like a punctuation mark at the end of a story that began 2,500 years ago. You duck inside. The darkness swallows you whole, and for a heartbeat, it feels like stepping into another century. The chamber is empty, just a hollow sigh of clay and dust. But your mind paints it alive. You see men stacking ice like blocks of moonlight. Hear the rustle of straw underfoot. Taste the sharp sweetness of falude sliding across your tongue. You smell rosewater, faint as memory, twining with the earthy musk of sarouj. And beneath it all, you feel the pulse, the old defiance beating like a slow drum. We will not burn. A shaft of moonlight slants through the vent above, spilling silver into the gloom. Dust motes drift in it, lazy as thoughts before sleep. You tilt your head back and trace the curve of the dome, a geometry so perfect, so serene, it makes your chest ache a little. It's not grandeur. It's not marble or gold. It's something quieter, harmony, a conversation between human hands and the breath of the earth. A promise sealed in clay that even the fiercest sun could not break. And in that hush, a thought curls in your mind, soft as frost. Maybe this wasn't just a fridge. Maybe it was a prayer, a hymn to survival, a reminder that even in the cruelest furnace, we reach for coolness, not just to live, but to live beautifully, to sip sweetness in the jaws of thirst, to carve comfort where logic says none should exist. Isn't that the essence of being human? That hunger for grace? Even when the world is a roaring fire, you step back outside. The night brushes your cheeks with velvet fingers, and the stars wink like conspirators. Behind you, the Yakchal looms, silent, eternal, wearing the desert like a cloak. You know you'll leave, but part of you will stay here, curled in the cool belly of that dome, breathing the hush of ancient winters. Because some stories don't end, they just drift, like sand in the wind, waiting for someone to listen. So now, my friend, let go. Feel your body sink into the softness of your bed, the coolness curling around your toes like a forgotten breeze. Let the hum of history fade into the lull of the night. And as your eyelids grow heavy, remember this. Once upon a time, in a land of fire, humans built a home for cold, and it worked. Sleep now, knowing that wonder has always been our birthright. Settle in, slow your breath, and let the weight of the day slip away like sand through your fingers. Picture a desert under starlight, endless and soft, where the air hums with quiet and the earth holds secrets in its bones. In the center of that stillness rises a dome, curved and patient, cradling shadows older than memory. Step closer in your mind. Feel the coolness kiss your skin, soothing, steady, like a gentle tide washing over heat. Each breath you take is lighter now, drawn through centuries of calm. Imagine tracing your fingers along the wall, smooth, silent, strong. It whispers of hands that shaped it, of laughter that echoed here, of dreams frozen into time. Above, a vent spills silver moonlight, and the dust dances slow, like thoughts softening into sleep. There is no hurry here, no noise, only the hush of clay and the distant hum of wind threading through the stars. Let your body sink deeper into comfort, as if you're lying on cool earth, safe under an endless sky. Feel your muscles loosen, your thoughts drift like stray petals on water. In this stillness, there is no past, no future, just now. A quiet sanctuary where heat cannot touch you, and the world's weight melts away. Close your eyes. Let the whisper of ancient frost wrap around your heart like a lullaby. The Yakchal stands guard in the desert of your mind, and in its shadow, you are safe, calm, and endlessly cool. Sleep, traveler. Sleep deep. The night will hold you gently, and when you wake, the story will still be there, patient as stone, waiting for your return.